When I discovered 112 brand new houses worth $41 million built on land I'd inherited for 25 years. That HOA queen thought she'd orchestrated the perfect swindle. Little did she know she just delivered me the keys to her entire community. Imagine returning from vacation to find a complete neighborhood where your horses used to roam. Families moving in with moving trucks, children drawing with sidewalk chalk, all on your property without authorization. Rebecca Sterling had the nerve to hit me with a restraining order, alleging I was intimidating families with surveying gear. This woman hijacked my land, then portrayed me as the menacing neighbor terrorizing helpless children. What she didn't realize, my great-grandfather's 1923 agreement means every house she constructed automatically became mine the second they laid the first concrete. Soon she'd discover why you never cross a property surveyor who's been tracking land theft for 35 years, especially when federal regulations are on your side. Before we jump in, what would you do if someone constructed 112 houses on your land? Share your revenge plans below and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Benjamin Ashford. People call me Ben, and I'm what you might describe as old-fashioned Georgia stubborn. At 63, I've spent 35 years as a property surveyor, mapping boundary lines and resolving property conflicts across 4 counties. My great-grandfather passed down 923 acres of prime rolling meadows back in '99, along with a lesson. Son, never trust a person who surveys land without getting dirt under their fingernails. The morning fog here in Clearwater County carries the crisp scent of magnolia mixed with exhaust fumes from the highway. That's development creeping into ranch country, I reckon. Every sunrise, I'd patrol my property lines with black coffee, listening to gravel crunch beneath my boots while inspecting for weather damage. The sharp taste of well water and the musty smell of horses reminded me this was authentic ranching, not the suburban illusion overtaking Georgia. My late wife Ellen used to joke that I maintained property documents like other folks collect stamps, obsessively and with dedication that borders on madness. When she died 4 years ago, our 3 kids relocated to pursue metropolitan careers in Denver and Seattle. Can't fault them for wanting more adventure than watching crops grow, but it left me echoing around a 1948 ranch house with just my quarter horses and recollections. Enter Rebecca Sterling. Call me Becca. The type of woman who wields a tablet like a deadly weapon and communicates in passive-aggressive business jargon that could make Mother Teresa throw haymakers. At 49, she's perfected that suburban HOA chairwoman appearance. Platinum highlights straight from the beauty parlor, white Mercedes sedan detailed monthly, and the soulless grin of someone who cited neighbors for having the incorrect shade of shutters. Becca's wed to Charles Sterling, our city councilman, which around Millbrook means she considers herself aristocracy. For 6 years, she had been stalking my property like a vulture, dispatching representatives with offensive offers for my undeveloped ranch land. The stench of desperation was stronger than her shopping mall fragrance every time she appeared uninvited with another generous deal. The real crisis began when I came back from a 4-week trip, helping my son Michael through a complicated bankruptcy in Colorado. I'd been anticipating returning to my peaceful schedule, coffee at dawn, monitoring horses, perhaps repairing gate posts if I felt motivated. You know, the kind of retirement that doesn't include video conferences or HOA conflicts. But pulling up my dirt driveway, something felt off. Instead of horses neighing and hawks calling, I heard the suburban orchestra of leaf blowers humming and kids screaming. Sounds that had no place being on my back, 50 acres. I seized my surveying tools and walked toward the commotion, assuming maybe some teenagers were trespassing or a family had broken down near my fence line. Hiking through my pasture, the breeze carried strange aromas of fresh concrete and new timber instead of wildflowers and pond water. What I discovered made my coffee cup slip from my fingers and shatter against a granite boulder. 112 flawless houses scattered across my land like a suburban disease. Pristine lawns where my quarter horses used to graze. A decorative stone gateway reading Sunset Ridge Estates in lettering fancier than a royal invitation. Families unloading moving vans. Children creating chalk artwork on sidewalks. Labrador retrievers fetching frisbees. The complete suburban dream package constructed on every inch of my back pasture. I stood there staring like a confused tourist, questioning if I'd somehow driven to the wrong county. But there was my great-grandfather's pecan tree with Ellen's initials etched in the trunk. There was Silver Creek where I'd learned to fish. This was certainly my land, but somebody had transformed it into suburbia without bothering to request permission. That's when Becca appeared in a golf cart wearing an official HOA pin, approaching me like she ruled the territory, which based on her arrogant expression, she completely believed she did. "Excuse me, sir," she declared in that honey-sweet tone that immediately made my teeth grind. "This is private property. Sunset Ridge is a gated community for homeowners and authorized visitors only." I gazed around at my trees, my creek, the land where my great-grandfather taught me to honor property boundaries and understood I was about to receive a crash course in small-town corruption. "Ma'am," I said, controlling my voice despite wanting to explode, "I believe there's been some sort of misunderstanding. This is my property. Has been since 1999. Becca's laughter sounded like metal scraping concrete. "Oh, sweetie, I'm afraid you're mistaken. The Sunset Ridge development was acquired legally from Clearwater Development Holdings 3 years ago." She retrieved a binder thick enough to stop a bullet, scanning through pages with the assurance of someone who'd never been questioned. "See right here? 923 acres purchased for market value. I'm certain this is just a mapping mistake on your part." The patronizing tone in her voice made my blood boil. But 35 years of handling property conflicts taught me to record everything and remain composed when someone's attempting to steal you blind. "Mind if I examine those papers?" "I'm not legally obligated to share confidential HOA business with trespassers," she huffed, gripping that binder like it held state secrets. "But I'll tell you what, I'm feeling charitable today. These families have children starting school in 3 weeks. Surely we can arrange some agreement that doesn't disrupt their lives." That's when I knew this wasn't an error. This was a scam wrapped in suburban self-righteousness. 2 days later, Deputy Robert Sterling knocked on my door with documents and a smirk that revealed everything about receiving fair treatment in this county. The restraining order accused me of trespassing on Sunset Ridge property and threatening residents with surveying equipment in a hostile manner. Apparently, carrying a measuring device now counted as wielding a weapon. The order banned me from entering my own back 50, and Robert made sure to mention that violation meant imprisonment. Becca wasn't finished flexing her suburban warfare tactics. Within days, every Sunset Ridge resident received a notice about the unstable former property owner who presented a potential danger to families and children. She established a neighborhood watch committee that monitored my property line with the intensity of security guards, photographing me feeding my own horses like I was operating a drug operation. The digital attack came next. Becca shared before and after photos on the Millbrook Facebook page. My weathered ranch house against the spotless subdivision, alleging my neglected property was attracting pests and decreasing property values. The comment section erupted into online warfare between locals who knew my family and newcomers who believed Becca's act completely. But here's where 35 years of surveying knowledge pays off. While Becca was busy playing martyr online, I drove to the county records office and began pulling files. The recording fee for that alleged property sale caught my attention immediately. $35 measly dollars. Back in my early surveying days, I discovered that Georgia requires major property transfers to have notarized declarations with multiple witnesses and recording fees that reflect the transaction value. This reeked fishier than spoiled seafood. The real evidence was the notary seal. Margaret Daniels had processed real estate closings for 4 decades. Wonderful elderly woman who baked the finest apple pie in the county. Problem was, Margaret passed away 8 months before she supposedly notarized my property transfer. Unless she was signing papers from beyond the grave, somebody had counterfeited her seal. I contacted my old surveying partner, Jasper Tank Rodriguez, who's forgotten more about property law than most attorneys ever learn. Tank spent 3 days with his GPS equipment walking every foot of my boundaries, spitting sunflower seeds and grumbling about amateur fraud schemes. "Ben," he finally said, "your property lines are precise within 4 inches. That entire subdivision is sitting on your land like ticks on a bloodhound." While I was constructing my case, Becca escalated to psychological manipulation. Guardian Security began patrolling Sunset Ridge in golf carts with communication devices like my quarter horses posed a national security threat. Then came the state licensing board complaint claiming I was mentally deteriorating and dangerous to public welfare. Her proof? Insisting on accessing my own property. The county joined in by threatening to declare my ranch house a public hazard. Apparently, 75 years of honest aging made my home an eyesore compared to the cookie-cutter mansion squatting on my pasture. That evening, checking my fence line in the fading light, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Surveillance cameras concealed in my pecan trees with wires running back toward Sunset Ridge. The acrid odor of electrical components and fresh-cut plastic told the tale. They'd been stealing power from my meter to operate monitoring equipment. Years ago, I'd helped a neighbor catch metal thieves using an electromagnetic scanner from the supply store, and the same method revealed months of unauthorized surveillance. I sat in Ellen's flower garden as crickets sang, and the fragrance of her jasmine filled the evening air, wondering if I should just accept whatever money Becca offered and retire somewhere peaceful. Then I remembered my great-grandfather's advice after the power company tried to steal our water rights back in '91. Boy, when someone attempts to steal your land, they're not just taking soil, they're stealing your family's legacy. Ellen had concurred, writing in her diary that night, "Ben never retreats from defending what's righteous. Time to honor that tradition." 3 weeks later, Becca played her media trump card. Channel 12, news arrived at Sunset Ridge like they were covering a presidential scandal, complete with satellite van and enough camera gear to film a blockbuster movie. The angle? Aging man's delusions endanger young families. They interviewed worried mothers holding designer toddlers, painted me as a disturbed recluse living in fantasies, and gave Becca 8 uninterrupted minutes to deliver her Academy Award-worthy victim performance. "We just want to live in peace," she wept, dabbing eyes with tissues that appeared suspiciously dry. "It pains my heart to witness someone so confused, but we can't allow one person's mental decline to endanger our children." The segment made me appear like the antagonist in a cable movie about suburban horror. But while Becca was busy earning Oscars for manufactured tears, I was doing what surveyors do best, following document trails and connecting evidence. My property insurance got terminated the next morning. The notice claimed significant alteration in land use invalidated my coverage based on satellite images showing residential construction. Now, here's something fascinating I learned helping my neighbor Patricia catch insurance scams back in '05. Agents often use insider information to trigger cancellations, leaving targets vulnerable right before something unfortunate occurs. Turns out dear Becca worked freelance for Premier Trust Insurance, the same company that dropped me. She'd used her system access to sabotage my coverage, timing it perfectly with her legal offensive. The legal system showed its true colors when Judge William Crawford scheduled an emergency hearing. Crawford played golf with Charles every Tuesday and held investments in 5 development firms. Ethics violations weren't in his dictionary. My court-appointed lawyer appeared smelling like whiskey and mispronounced my name 3 times before suggesting I accept defeat and compromise. When I demanded a jury trial, they postponed indefinitely, probably hoping I'd expire from natural causes first. Meanwhile, Becca persuaded Sunset Ridge families that their property values would plummet if the deranged old man prevailed. She established a legal defense fund and raised $75,000 for court costs. Interesting how that money financed the Sterling's Mediterranean cruise. Charles's Instagram posts from Greek island wine tastings were quite informative. The residents organized charity drives and fundraising dinners, unknowingly financing their own manipulation with the fervor of devoted followers. I wasn't idle, though. Every interaction got recorded on my tablet using an application Michael installed with timestamps and GPS data that would stand up in federal court. Security cameras went up around my property perimeter, all positioned legally but documenting every aspect of their intimidation campaign. The harassment intensified rapidly. Dead creatures appeared on my doorstep, mostly raccoons, though someone escalated to a deer that stank like rotten garbage. Screws scattered across my driveway punctured my pickup tires 3 times. Anonymous calls threatened, "Accidents happen to stubborn old ranchers, always at 2 a.m. when the menace felt most genuine." They obstructed access to my own mailbox, claiming it stood on Sunset Ridge easement property. Guardian security guards threatened arrest if I retrieved my own mail. The irony of stealing mail while accusing me of trespassing wasn't lost on anyone with basic intelligence. That's when my saving grace arrived, wearing denim and carrying a recorder. Jessica Parker, investigative journalist for the Atlanta Herald, had relocated to rural Georgia, seeking tranquility after metropolitan exhaustion. She approached me after witnessing Channel 12's character assassination, her legal reporting instinct screaming that something stunk worse than my septic system. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "I've investigated enough corporate crime to identify a con game. Mind if I review your documentation?" Jessica spent 4 days independently examining public records, verifying my ownership, and uncovering Sunset Ridge promotional materials dated 3 years before the supposed acquisition. Her experience covering financial crimes taught her that internet archives never deceive. The Wayback Machine revealed deleted web pages displaying development blueprints from 2022, proving premeditation. She exposed Charles's sealed criminal record for property fraud in Alabama. Our city councilman had previous experience stealing land, just never attempted grand larceny on this magnitude. The county escalated to eminent domain threats, claiming Sunset Ridge provided critical housing for economic growth. They valued my 923 acres at $95,000 agricultural worth, ignoring the $18 million residential potential. Classic government theft. Steal property for nickels, hand it to developer associates for millions. My water source got poisoned overnight. Horses started displaying toxicity symptoms traced to Sunset Ridge storm drainage runoff. The subdivision violated environmental standards, leaking hazardous construction chemicals into groundwater, feeding my well in Silver Creek. Stress finally overwhelmed me. Hospital stay for heart palpitations. Physicians recommending stress reduction and senior living. That's when Becca revealed her true character, visiting with crocodile tears and a $350,000 settlement proposal. "Ben," she whispered, hovering over my hospital bed like a scavenger, This could all vanish tomorrow. Think about your family. Is dirt really worth dying for? Lying there with heart monitors beeping, disinfectant smell stinging my nostrils, and IV tubes puncturing my arm, I realized this transcended property disputes. This was about stopping criminals who'd exploited an entire community while masquerading behind suburban respectability. Time to strike back. Leaving that hospital bed felt like awakening from a nightmare into a battlefield. While I'd been playing patient, Becca and Charles had been busy solidifying their theft with political maneuvering slick enough to make casino con artists envious. Charles introduced an emergency city council measure to incorporate Sunset Ridge into Millbrook city limits, a bureaucratic masterstroke that hit me like a sledgehammer to the skull. Municipal jurisdiction would override county property regulations, placing the subdivision under city authority where Charles's influence ran deeper than a Georgia sinkhole. They'd fast-tracked the vote for 12 days out, buried the notification in legal advertisements where only lawyers and property surveyors dared to venture. Jessica's investigation shifted into high gear, uncovering document fraud that made Enron look like beginners' mistakes. Computer analysis revealed Charles's operation was copying and pasting notary seals, stealing digital signatures from legitimate transactions like a teenager downloading movies. The Margaret Daniels forgery wasn't isolated. They'd been robbing deceased notaries' identities across 6 counties. Sunset Ridge families started receiving HOA special levies that would make a mob boss blush. Becca demanded thousands per household to finance the legal war, threatening foreclosure for non-payment. She was literally blackmailing the people she'd supposedly protected, charging them premium fees to defend property they didn't legally own. The irony was thicker than Ellen's biscuits. Residents paying to help steal their own investments. Several families contacted me secretly, voices shaking over phone calls made after midnight when their children were sleeping. They'd begun questioning why their HOA dictator needed luxury car payments to fight one old man with a measuring tape. I hired an independent construction inspector using Jessica's newspaper funding. Turns out journalistic integrity sometimes comes with budgets for exposing corruption. What he found made my surveyor's heart weep. 52 major code violations, including houses built on wooden platforms over buried wetlands without proper foundation permits. The electrical systems violated county safety codes so severely that one spark could transform Sunset Ridge into a suburban inferno. Becca's desperation peaked when she attempted bribing Dr. Martinez to declare me mentally incompetent. $35,000 to fabricate Alzheimer's diagnosis and recommend guardianship proceedings. The good doctor recorded every word. She'd also hired some sleazy private detective to invent stories about my military background, claims so absurd that any veteran could disprove them between sips of coffee. The environmental bombshell hit like lightning on a golf course. Jessica discovered Sunset Ridge was constructed over federally protected wetlands without EPA authorization, violating more environmental statutes than an oil disaster. The original survey had been falsified by Charles's consulting firm, claiming sensitive marsh ecosystem was insignificant grassland. They'd destroyed rare turtle nesting grounds, triggering Endangered Species Act violations, carrying $40,000 in daily penalties, enough money to purchase every house in the subdivision 3 times over. Tommy Gutierrez finally broke his silence after months of threats against his family. The former construction supervisor provided copies of the authentic environmental survey, plus photographs of Charles ordering crews to dump concrete over protected wetlands. Tommy had resigned rather than participate in environmental destruction, then endured harassment for having integrity, apparently a scarce commodity in the construction industry these days. Jessica's financial investigation traced Sunset Ridge funding through more shell corporations than a carnival shell game, connected to offshore accounts that screamed money laundering louder than a fire alarm. The construction loans were secured using my property as collateral without my knowledge, creating fraud so obvious that bank officials would face federal conspiracy charges when this house of cards collapsed. The homeowner's awakening was brutal and swift. Property titles were meaningless. Title insurance excluded disputed land coverage, and families faced losing homes while still owing mortgages on houses they never legally owned. Secret resident meetings sprouted like weeds after rainfall, discussing class action lawsuits against the people who'd sold them the American dream built on environmental catastrophe. Becca announced a Sunset Ridge Community Festival to demonstrate neighborhood solidarity, her final desperate gambit for public sympathy. Politicians, law enforcement, and media were invited to witness how normal families were being victimized by one unstable neighbor. She'd scheduled the festival for the same day as the city council and corporation vote, planning to pressure politicians with images of children enjoying carnival rides while the crazy old rancher tried to steal their homes. But 2 can play the timing game. Jessica coordinated federal EPA inspectors to schedule their wetlands investigation for festival day. Tommy agreed to testify about environmental cover-ups. I'd assembled evidence packages showing the complete fraud scope, including my great-grandfather's 1923 railroad agreements that these amateurs never researched. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose 3 decades of corruption in front of half the county. The sweet aroma of barbecue smoke and candy apples would soon blend with the bitter stench of burning lies. Becca thought she was orchestrating a public relations triumph to cement her theft. Instead, she was about to discover why you never steal from a man who documents every square foot of soil in 4 counties. Festival Day was approaching, and I planned to give Sunset Ridge a celebration they'd never forget. Jessica's phone call at 5:30 a.m., 4 days before the festival, changed everything. "Ben, get down to the courthouse archive right now. I found something that's going to explode this case apart like dynamite in a chicken coop." I drove through morning mist, thick as Ellen's oatmeal, my heart pounding harder than a teenager's first kiss. Jessica met me at the courthouse rear entrance, disheveled and clutching coffee-stained documents like she'd discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls buried under decades of bureaucratic dust. "The railway archives?" she gasped, pulling me down squeaky wooden steps into a basement that smelled like mothballs and broken promises. I was researching easement law for another story when I stumbled across these treasures. She spread yellow documents across a table under fluorescent lights that flickered like dying fireflies. Original 1923 railroad easement agreements sealed in manila folders that hadn't seen daylight since Truman was president. The musty paper crackled under my fingers like autumn leaves, and suddenly I could hear my great-grandfather's voice echoing through 10 decades. "Your great-grandfather was a stone-cold genius, Ben. Look at Section 9. My hands shook reading the faded typewriter text that would make modern attorneys weep with professional envy. Benjamin Ashford, Sr. hadn't just negotiated mineral rights with Georgia Central Railroad. He'd secured development protection stronger than Fort Knox. Any unauthorized structures constructed on Ashford property would automatically transfer ownership to the family, along with every improvement, fixture, and blade of grass. "Sweet mother of pearl," I whispered, tasting the metallic tang of shock in my mouth. Great-grandpa saw this coming a century ago. The contract language was bulletproof. Unauthorized construction automatically voided competing land claims and transferred all improvements to the rightful owner. Filed with the Federal Railway Commission, it carried jurisdiction that made state property law look like suggestions scribbled on cocktail napkins. No county judge, city council, or HOA dictator could touch these rights. They were protected by federal transportation law older than sliced bread. Jessica's detective work revealed the smoking gun. My property extended 250 feet beyond current survey markers, encompassing not just 112 houses, but Sunset Ridge Clubhouse, swimming pool, tennis courts, and that precious 12-hole golf course where Charles played every weekend. Satellite imagery from 2020 showed boundary stakes mysteriously relocated during one of my Colorado visits. Total theft includes recreational facilities worth $12 million, Jessica calculated, spreading printouts like a Vegas dealer. Under your great-grandfather's contract, Becca just handed you a $53 million gift wrapped in suburban stupidity. The beautiful irony made me laugh until tears streamed down my cheeks. 112 houses at $375,000 each, plus amenities, all mine, thanks to a contract these amateurs never researched. The 1923 agreement had no statute of limitations, meaning their fraud actually strengthened my position instead of threatening it. Jessica had traced Charles's connection to the Railway Historical Society, discovering he'd accessed these same documents 4 years ago through ancestry research. Email evidence revealed a detailed theft plan, knowing about the easement clause, but gambling I'd never find the original contracts. He thought he could outsmart a family that's been documenting property rights since Calvin Coolidge was president, Jessica chuckled, but he made one crucial miscalculation. The insurance implications were staggering. Sunset Ridge carried $75 million in fraudulent coverage based on false ownership documents. When this collapsed, insurance companies would face liability exposure bigger than their executive bonuses. Federal jurisdiction meant local corruption couldn't protect the Sterlings anymore. U.S. Marshals would enforce the 1923 contract with authority that made county sheriffs look like mall security guards. The strategic advantage was overwhelming. I didn't need to prove ownership because great-grandpa's contract automatically granted it. Becca's festival would become her public execution, and she was about to hand me the rope while the cameras rolled. Jessica's dining room table disappeared under an avalanche of legal documents, maps, laptops, and enough coffee cups to fuel a space launch. The sweet aroma of her homemade banana bread battled the acrid smell of printer ink as we plotted the downfall of Sunset Ridge suburban empire. Ellen would have loved this organized chaos with a righteous purpose. Marcus Thompson arrived looking like federal justice in a custom suit. This gray-haired prosecutor had spent 45 years sending white-collar criminals to prison, and his horn-rimmed glasses had witnessed more courtroom victories than a Triple Crown champion. He reviewed our evidence with surgical precision. "Your great-grandfather's 1923 contract is tighter than bark on an oak," Marcus said, spreading the yellow documents like playing cards. "I've prosecuted 15 railway easement cases. This language is so bulletproof it could stop a locomotive." Dr. Amanda Clearwater joined via video call, her EPA credentials adding environmental felonies to our growing list of charges. The wetlands damage assessment made my surveyor's soul weep. $22 million to restore habitat that had taken millennia to develop naturally. "The turtle species they destroyed is federally protected," Dr. Clearwater explained, her voice carrying congressional testimony authority. "Daily fines compound faster than a teenager's student loans. We're talking generational bankruptcy." Tommy Gutierrez arrived looking like a man who'd been carrying concrete guilt for months. The former construction supervisor spread blueprints across Jessica's table, revealing engineering disasters that would make any builder's insurance agent faint. "These houses are death traps on stilts," Tommy said, his calloused finger tracing foundation plans. "Charles ordered pressure-treated lumber instead of proper concrete pilings to save money. Families are living in expensive houseboats that don't know they're sinking yet." The gallows humor wasn't lost on anyone. Sunset Ridge residents were literally living above their problems. Susan Rodriguez, our forensic accountant, connected financial dots with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure in Excel spreadsheets. Her laptop displayed money trails that looked like spaghetti art created by intoxicated toddlers. "Total fraud exceeds $127 million, Susan announced, each number landing like artillery shells. They pre-sold 200 lots using fake ownership documents. Charles Ponzi would be impressed by this scheme's ambition. Jessica orchestrated media strategy with military precision, marking our whiteboard timeline like D-Day invasion plans. EPA inspection at 10 during opening ceremonies, federal marshals at 1 during face painting. My story goes live at 2 when families check phones over barbecue. The coordination impressed even my surveyor's love of detailed planning. EPA handled environmental crimes. FBI covered financial fraud, and U.S. Marshals would serve papers that local corruption couldn't touch, like watching a Swiss watch designed by angry federal agents. My biggest concern was protecting innocent families caught in Becca's web. Marcus had researched victim compensation programs while I developed fair rent-to-own agreements for residents who wanted to stay. "These people bought the American dream from professional liars," I insisted, tasting the metallic determination that meant no compromise on principles. "I'll expose the criminals without destroying the casualties." Technology deployment turned Jessica's journalism team into a documentary crew. Discrete recording equipment, live streaming capability, and evidence collection systems would capture every moment for federal prosecution and social media transparency. The decoy operation required acting skills I didn't know this old surveyor possessed. I'd pretend to negotiate with Becca during the festival, keeping the Sterlings distracted while federal agents positioned like chess pieces around Sunset Ridge. Pastor David Williams provided moral authority that small-town corruption couldn't dismiss. His Baptist church would shelter displaced residents while his historical knowledge about the Ashford family's century-long community presence gave weight to our cause. Professional exhibits prepared for media would tell the story without words. Before and after photos of wetlands destruction, side-by-side forgery comparisons, and water contamination evidence would make evening news editors weep with journalistic joy. Backup plans covered every nightmare scenario from local interference to flight risks. Evidence lived in multiple secure locations. Civil rights attorneys stood ready for retaliation, and 4 national news networks had contacts warming up for potential coverage. The evening before festival day, I visited Ellen's grave as sunset painted the sky colors she'd loved, soft oranges and purples that reminded me why this land mattered beyond money or property rights. Her journal entry from our 25th anniversary echoed in memory. "Ben fights for what's right, not what's easy." Kneeling beside her headstone, breathing the sweet scent of jasmine that grew wild around her resting place, I made a promise. Tomorrow would expose 30 years of corruption while protecting families who'd been victimized by their own dreams. Becca had planned a festival to celebrate her theft. Instead, she was about to host the most expensive public confession in Georgia history, served with a side of federal justice and broadcast live for anyone with internet access. The irony tasted sweeter than Jessica's banana bread. Festival morning arrived with the kind of picture-perfect weather that made Becca believe God himself endorsed her suburban theft. Sunset Ridge sparkled like a movie set decorated with enough streamers and banners to make Disneyland jealous. The smell of barbecue smoke and candy apples mixed with fresh-cut grass created an atmosphere of wholesome family fun that would have been heartwarming if it wasn't built on decades of fraud. Becca had pulled out every manipulation trick in the suburban playbook. Children's choirs performed at the opening ceremony. Local politicians gave speeches about protecting family values. and media cameras focused on sympathetic families while carefully avoiding the federal agents positioned discreetly around the festival grounds like well-dressed predators. The night before, someone had cut my internet and phone lines. Amateur hour intimidation that made me laugh harder than a comedy special. My pickup tires got slashed again, and a threatening note appeared on my windshield promising, "Accidents happen to stubborn old ranchers." Jessica's car got vandalized with spray paint reading media lies in letters that looked like a preschooler's first attempt at rebellion. Charles had called an emergency city council meeting for Saturday morning, pushing the Sunset Ridge Incorporation vote with the desperation of a used car salesman on the last day of the month. 4 council members received anonymous $15,000 donations the day before. Jessica's cameras caught the cash handoffs in parking lots like some low-budget spy movie. My bank accounts got frozen Friday afternoon, supposedly due to suspicious activity and money laundering investigation. The bank manager, Charles's cousin, refused to explain specifics beyond bureaucratic double talk that would make a tax attorney proud. Suddenly, I couldn't access funds for legal fees or groceries. Financial warfare designed to force surrender through starvation. Becca cranked up the family manipulation, telling residents, "I plan to bulldoze houses immediately after winning, leaving children homeless before school started." She created fake social media profiles, spreading rumors about my mental health with the dedication of a teenage cyberbully. Sunset Ridge parents organized protective patrols around the subdivision like their children faced invasion from one old man with surveying equipment. The construction evidence destruction began overnight. Crews arrived with truckloads of clean soil to cover contaminated areas attempting to hide environmental violations before EPA inspection. Tommy documented the cover-up with hidden cameras, capturing federal obstruction of justice that carried 7-year prison sentences. Charles contacted state environmental officials claiming Jessica's investigation was fake news, arranging for a friendly local TV station to interview concerned residents about media harassment. Social media bots flooded Sunset Ridge posts with supportive comments that read like they were written by the same person using a thesaurus. Becca hired Atlanta's most aggressive law firm, filing a $75 million defamation suit against Jessica and her newspaper. They demanded retraction of all fraud stories and attempted to get injunctions blocking Festival Day coverage, basically trying to win through legal intimidation what they couldn't accomplish through actual innocence. Someone tipped off EPA inspectors about security threats at the festival, filing anonymous complaints about federal overreach and bureaucratic harassment of working families. Charles's political connections pressured EPA to delay investigation, playing jurisdictional games that would make constitutional lawyers weep. The community split down the middle like a poorly designed subdivision. Longtime residents chose sides based on decades-old grudges. Local businesses faced boycott threats for supporting either party, and the Chamber of Commerce divided faster than divorce proceedings. Private security increased around Sunset Ridge with guards following Jessica while she worked. Unmarked cars parked outside my property overnight, and harassment campaigns that included construction noise starting at 5 every morning. The smell of diesel exhaust and dust became constant reminders that Becca would destroy the peaceful countryside to protect her theft. Tommy Gutierrez received death threats complete with family photos marked with red X's, witness intimidation that crossed federal lines into terrorism territory. His employer got pressured to fire him for unreliable behavior, forcing FBI to place Tommy in witness protection. Becca's desperation reached pathetic levels when she contacted my adult children in Colorado and Washington, claiming their father was having a mental breakdown and suggesting guardianship proceedings to protect his assets. She implied I was dishonoring Ellen's memory by fighting for family land. Psychological manipulation that would make cult leaders take notes. The insurance scam exposure came when Jessica discovered Sunset Ridge policies were printed on stolen letterhead from legitimate companies. Residents' homeowner insurance would be denied because the policies never existed, leaving families facing financial disaster without coverage. Charles filed emergency motions to halt federal investigation, court shopping for friendly judges, and claiming agencies lacked jurisdiction over local property disputes. He submitted dozens of procedural motions designed to delay and confuse. Procedural warfare that made tax code look simple. Festival Day crystallized into the final battleground where truth would face suburban lies under bright Georgia sunshine. Media crews arrived like cavalry reinforcements. Federal agents positioned discreetly and community tension reached breaking point. The sweet smell of funnel cakes and the innocent laughter of children would soon mix with the bitter taste of exposed corruption and federal justice served cold. Festival Day morning broke with the kind of oppressive humidity that makes Georgia summers legendary and tempers shorter than a roadside firecracker. Sunset Ridge looked like Norman Rockwell's fever dream. Red, white, and blue bunting draped over stolen land. Children's laughter echoing across wetlands that had been murdered for suburban sprawl. Becca orchestrated her final performance at the festival pavilion, staging a public settlement meeting with all the subtlety of a Broadway musical. She'd brought microphones, speakers, and an oversized cardboard check for $450,000, playing to cameras like she was accepting an Academy Award for Best Supporting Victim. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the gathering crowd, dabbing her eyes with tissues that looked suspiciously dry, "I'm here to demonstrate how reasonable people can resolve conflicts without destroying families." The oversized check fluttered in the breeze like a surrender flag made of lies. I played my part in this theatrical farce, pretending to consider her offer while federal agents positioned around the festival like pieces on a chessboard. The smell of barbecue smoke and candy apples couldn't mask the metallic taste of justice approaching faster than a summer thunderstorm. Dr. Amanda Clearwater arrived discreetly during the children's magic show, carrying EPA,